Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala. Now, this is a video I meant to have out a couple of days ago, sorry about that, but we're talking about Naval Forces. If you don't know, Naval Forces is officially out. You have tech trees to grind now, and you can play whenever you like instead of only on the weekend tests, but only if you've bought your way in with one of the premium bundle packs, or, like me, have Gaijin invite you in, thanks Content Partnership Program. Now, before you get mad, Gaijin has often done things this way. The French Air Force and tank tech trees were locked off for the first few weeks of their release, unless you'd bought your way in with pre-order packs, as was, I think, the Italian tech tree. I don't quite remember. Point is, the Naval Forces trees will be freely accessible soon. It is still in beta, everything is subject to change, and apparently your experience will get reset, so all of your grinding will be reset when this test ends. I don't necessarily agree with that, nor think there's a reason for it. But let's see if we can help the development of this aspect of the game along the way, Now, the gameplay you're seeing in the background today is my first matches in the German LS class reserve tier torpedo boat. I'd also played a single match in the American reserve tier boat a couple days ago. It's been fun, but I'm anxious to get to the bigger stuff. So the question that I'm sure is on everybody's lips, or that everybody's typing into the comments should I say, where's our goddamn Italian tanks already? No, but in all seriousness, should you wait for the full release of Naval Forces, or buy your way into beta testing now? Well, I'm honestly stumped on this. Naval Forces battles, at least the last couple of weekend tests that were done, have been fantastic fun, and once you unlock your destroyers and cruisers, I'm sure this iteration of the game mode will play exactly the same way. So, skipping the early tier gameplay by getting a destroyer from the off might improve your experience enough to really make it worth your money. There is very little to tier 1. I've actually had the most fun up tiering the LS class to battle rating 3.7, which lands you in destroyer territory and can provide insane fun. The problem is with how Gaijin has structured the tech trees. Now, oddly enough, this is one issue that's actually come from me having free access to Naval CBT without having to buy a premium destroyer, either the Carl Galster or the Fletcher class for America. I think that's the USS Cowell, but I'm not sure. Now, for all of you who have bought these ships, you get to skip the early boats and completely avoid the issue, but for anyone keen to wait for Naval Forces to be freely accessible, you're going to have to grind your way through the entire tree before unlocking your cruisers. As for which nation you should start with, I'm going for the German Kriegsmarine rather than the US Navy. These are the only two trees out right now, but I'm sure the other nations will arrive soon. There's currently no Naval tab under the To Battle button. You still have to go into the Events tab, so that just shows you how this is still early days. Now, there are several problems with how the game is structured, and unfortunately that's what we're going to focus mainly on here. The good points? The game is truly fun to play in arcade and RB, which is an improvement over previous tests. There's really not too much more to be said than that. The ship types are very interesting, with several never before seen additions, and maps are good, if a little simple and uninspiring to look at. The Ireland map, however, is gosh darn beautiful. However, all maps are far too small, making spawn camping a massive issue. The game visually looks outstanding, absolutely beautiful, and the different weather conditions, so much fun to play around in. This is where my best fun in these battles has come from so far. The upgrade modules and crew skill training is laid out in a very sensible way, with equivalence in the aircraft and grind forces aspects of the game. Unfortunately, however, with the LS class at least, there is no way to put out fires. Repeatedly, I've had fires set, hit the FPE button immediately, and still had my ship burn down before the fire's been put out. It burns down too quickly, putting out fires takes too long. Even with FPE, the second you get set on fire, your game is over. Actually, a little edit from the future. Since making this video, I have actually managed to put out fires by dipping my on-fire boat under the waves in harsh weather conditions. It's really interesting that Gaijin's modelled that, and it was really fun to do. There is some imbalance. Like I said, the German LS class reserve tier torpedo boat is definitely the weaker of the two. The Albatross, however, is infamously destructive, and the American LCS ship is definitely one that's been dealing out the damage. But for the most part, the teams are on a level playing field from the off. As for grinding, the rewards are insanely low. Both the matches you're about to see earned me a total of 1000 RP each, with premium and I believe a 30% booster. Supposedly this is getting fixed, and it bloody better be, as that would make about 300 RP per match without boosters and premium time, which is an absolute joke. The gameplay itself is fine. Without capital ships there's really not too much to it. The aiming is still ridiculously dysfunctional, and lower tiers are just the SPAA on water that they always were. Secondary guns on larger ships are still trying to fire through islands, it's actually quite funny to see, and the flak on destroyers and cruisers is proving a little bit too powerful. I think the best way of fixing this would be to make sure you have to select a target, either a ship or a plane, for your secondary guns or anti-air guns respectively to fire at it, rather than just having them go off automatically. Against the lower tier and especially reserve tier boats, however, the planes are absolutely shredding without any way of countering them. It's worse than the rocket spam from close air support and tank battles in patch 1.69. In fact, I managed to rack up a total of 9 kills on boats without having to go back to reload once in an early tier BF 109. The only way to counter these planes is with the flak from the larger vessels. And the way the tech trees work, you won't actually have any of that with the lowest tiers of boats, the ones that are the most vulnerable. Just another reason why the boats shouldn't be fighting on teams without the capital ships. Ironically, what we actually need right here is BR compression. More on that in a moment. So it's not just one area of the game that has problems, low and high tiers both have their respective issues. But the more you progress through the tech tree, the better the gameplay gets. This is something that really can't be said about the air and ground aspects of War Thunder, where top tier for both game modes is a wee bit of a mess right now. As I said before, assassinating destroyers with the LS class is incredibly satisfying. But the problems come from the early grinding. For one, there's no matchmaker. Even in realistic mode, the US and German vehicles are mixed across teams, and reserve tier boats can get into cruiser battles where they really have no use whatsoever besides to fight each other. Now, I'm not sure if this is something that Gaijin plans to change, perhaps they already have, as in neither of these matches did I get into battles with capital ships like I did the day the trees first released. If so, then we go back to the old days of naval forces here, SPAA on water. Now, actually these vessels should get into battles with each other. The whole point of naval combat is that fleets made up of different ships and ship types support each other, covering each other's weaknesses and working with each other's strengths to get the job done. That would, however, require the implementation of earlier destroyers and cruisers at lower battle ratings, so that the ships and boats can be on an equal basis in any particular matchmaker. The problem now becomes the tech tree and the way it's structured. Now, this is a difficult situation, and definitely one I want you guys to leave your thoughts on down in the comments. The ship class and size goes up with the tier, meaning that the light cruisers, the Emden and Omaha, aren't unlockable until tier 4, while the 8 destroyers in the game so far are all tier 3, and everything smaller sits in tiers 1 and 2. Now, if that's a little bit difficult for you to follow, I'll stick an image of the German Naval Forces research tree up in the video for you to have a look at exactly how it's laid out yourselves. This is easily fixable. The Type 143 Albatross, for example, at BR 4.0, and to be honest should be 4.3, could come in tier 3, while the first 2 German destroyers at 3.7 could begin their own line at tier 2. Brackets for similar vehicles could help keep the tech trees cleaner and more organised. This would allow for the implementation of earlier cruisers and destroyers at lower tiers and battle ratings, and higher ones following what we currently have. Perhaps at tier 6 we'd even have 1940s heavy cruisers and possibly even battleships. I can dream. Now, in World of Warships, for those of you who don't know, you start at tier 1 with cruisers, get your first destroyer at tier 2, your first battleships at tier 3, and your first aircraft carriers, for the nations that have them, are unlockable at tier 4. This goes all the way down to tier 10, with all 4 lines extending all the way down. This doesn't quite work in War Thunder, as we'll never have gunboats at battle ratings of, say, 6.3 to 8.0 competing equally alongside heavy cruisers. The best of the boats, the Type 143 Albatross, is still subpar in a head-to-head with these very early cruisers. I think, however, for the sake of OCD, it's better that Gaijin restructures the naval research trees in this way, in keeping with the tank and aircraft trees, and allowing for earlier cruisers at battle ratings lower to sit in lower tiers and be unlocked more quickly. All this does is create a hole above the boats, where their lines simply end at tier 3. I think given that boats focus on completely different tactics, they could be balanced alongside destroyers in our current BR 5.0 cruisers. After all, we balance bombers and fighters amongst each other perfectly well, and balance SPAA based on how good they are at their own job, shooting down aircraft, not on their functionality as tank destroyers, despite that capability often going hand in hand. Cruisers might be the best weapons to have in a head-to-head engagement, but the gunboats will be doing more to win battles due to their speed. As I said, it's quite a difficult situation. For one, we have the KMS Emden light cruiser of the early 1920s, sitting a full 2 tiers and a 2.3 battle rating gap above the S100 Schnellboot of 1945. That's the sort of performance difference we're dealing with here. In fact, the Type 143 Albatross, sitting at a battle rating of 2.0, the absolute culmination of the boats in the game, is a 1970s missile-equipped fast attack craft in real life, and yet sits a full 2 tiers and 1.0 battle rating gap behind that same 1920s cruiser. Now, timescale has never been the main contributing factor of vehicles in-game. The most obvious case of this is being the AMX-30 main battle tank of 1972, sitting below the Panzer VIII Maus of 1944, and getting into battles with tanks from 1943 in a down tier. That's almost a 30-year gap. But the kind of cruisers we'd have to add at lower tiers, we'd be pushing 70 years gap between them and the Albatross, so it's no wonder the Gaijin doesn't want to do it that way. The way it's been done, however, is okay, it's functional, but it does mean that you have to grind out an entire tech tree before getting to the fun capital ship gameplay I'm sure everyone is actually after. It does prevent those holes below the current capital ships and above the boats, otherwise we'd simply have to deal with vessels of completely different battle rating ranges sitting directly across from each other in the same tier, but as I said, this would be the more conventional way of doing it. We do after all have the XM1 at 9.0 sitting in tier 5 alongside 7.0s. The German Kriegsmarine, for example, could have 5 different lines, with the reserve tier LS class preceding a whole line of Schnellboot models that would then culminate in the Albatross at tier 3. The Raumboot in another line ending at the MZ1 in tier 2, no, I'm not going to try and pronounce that German word. The 2 flak ferries and 2 artillery barges sitting in a third line across tiers 1 and 2, and the destroyers beginning in tier 2 with later models sitting in tier 3 and more advanced models coming later in tiers 4 and 5, and the current cruisers beginning a 5th line that only starts at tier 4. Perhaps we could squeeze that into tier 3 and have higher battle rating ships extending those lines into tiers 4, 5 and 6, right up to battle ratings of 8.0, 9.0. But that's just the German tree. Other nations could prove even more difficult to organise appropriately into research trees following this trend. I really don't have enough knowledge of naval history to give an opinion on that, but the US Navy does currently have fewer ships. Once again, all gonna change in time. I'm looking forward to grinding out both naval trees on live streams this weekend, so definitely follow me on Twitch, link below, and come join in the fun. Anyway, that's it for this video. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, come follow me at all the links in the description below, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, always remember, keep your bagpipes to hand and your kilt on, and I'll see you lads next video.